Look around you. Do you see the crowd cheering for your struggles? Do you see the world stopping for your pain? No. And that, my friend, is the greatest gift life has given you. Because the truth is simple, trust me. Nobody cares, and that is your freedom. When you first hear the words, trust me, nobody cares, they might sound cold, even cruel. But let's lean into that truth for a moment. The reason it stings is because we've been raised inside an illusion. From childhood, the story is repeated to us in different ways. People will always care. Someone will always be there to comfort you. The world will stop to notice when you stumble. Movies, books, and even the way we are nurtured often feed us this idea that sympathy is abundant, that others will constantly look out for us, and that our pain will always be acknowledged. But reality doesn't work that way. The world spins relentlessly, indifferent to the weight we carry on our shoulders. Everyone else has their own invisible burdens, and while they may nod politely or whisper a few words of comfort, their lives move on. Yours does too, whether you realize it or not. The illusion of sympathy is one of the most dangerous traps a person can fall into. It convinces you to wait for understanding, wait for recognition, wait for validation. But while you're waiting, the clock is ticking, time is moving, and opportunities are slipping by. No amount of pity will rewind that clock. No amount of sympathy will replace the effort you didn't put in. That's why breaking the illusion is so important. It forces you to confront life directly, without filters, without waiting for applause that may never come. Think about the times you've poured your heart out, hoping someone would fully understand what you're going through. Maybe they nodded, maybe they said, "I'm sorry to hear that," and maybe they even meant it. But deep down, you knew that when they walked away, their mind drifted back to their own problems, their own responsibilities, their own insecurities. It wasn't cruelty, it was simply life. They weren't villains for not carrying your pain. They were humans carrying their own. And the sooner you understand this, the sooner you stop expecting people to shoulder your battles. Now here's where the transformation begins. Once you stop expecting constant sympathy, you stop living for approval. You stop seeking permission to be strong. You stop looking for signs that others are clapping for your effort. That's when you realize the absence of attention isn't punishment. It's a kind of liberation. Because nobody is watching your every move, you can finally stop performing. You can start acting with authenticity. The fear of judgment loses its grip, because if most people aren't paying attention anyway, then what's the harm in failing, experimenting, or taking risks? Ask yourself this: how many dreams have you abandoned because you were worried about what people might say? How many ideas have you buried because you imagined laughter, ridicule, or rejection? But if nobody truly cares, then those imagined voices are meaningless. And if they don't care about your failures, then nothing should stop you from chasing your wildest ambitions. The illusion of sympathy keeps you chained, but the reality of indifference sets you free. This shift in mindset is not about bitterness. It's about empowerment. It's about realizing that the spotlight you thought was glaring on you is actually dim. And in that dimness, you can work, you can grow, you can struggle without every stumble being magnified. You gain the privacy to fail quietly and succeed loudly. You gain the space to craft yourself into something remarkable without begging the world to watch the entire process. Consider this. When someone falls, the world doesn't stop, traffic doesn't freeze, the sun doesn't dim. Most people glance, maybe they ask, "Are you okay?" And then they keep moving. That's not cruelty, that's life. And if you hold on to the expectation that the world should pause for your pain, you'll stay stuck in disappointment. But if you embrace the truth that you must rise on your own, every fall becomes fuel, every setback becomes an exercise in resilience. Here lies the paradox. The less you expect others to care, the more control you gain over your destiny. If sympathy is not guaranteed, then your motivation cannot depend on it. If encouragement isn't constant, then your discipline must be. If validation is scarce, then your self-belief must be abundant. This is the alchemy of strength, turning loneliness into independence, indifference into fuel. And when you finally accept that the crowd isn't coming, you stop waiting for their approval to begin. You stop stalling your own progress by hoping someone will push you forward. You realize that your life has always been your responsibility, and that no applause, no sympathy, no rescue mission is coming to carry you across the finish line. That realization may sound harsh, but it's actually the greatest form of empowerment you will ever receive, because the illusion of sympathy keeps you dependent, but the reality of indifference makes you unstoppable. So the next time you're tempted to think, "Does anyone really care about what I'm going through?" remember, the answer may very well be no. And that's not the end of the story, it's the beginning. Because if nobody is keeping score of your failures, then you're free to try again and again until you succeed. If nobody is holding you back with their expectations, then you're free to write your own script. And if nobody cares enough to dictate your life, then at last you have full ownership of it. That is the gift hidden inside the hard truth. Trust me, nobody cares. And the moment you accept that, you stop living for sympathy and start living for strength. Pain, the word alone carries weight. It is sharp, heavy, sometimes unbearable. But what makes pain so terrifying is not just the sting itself. It is the belief that we shouldn't have to carry it alone. We convince ourselves that others will share the load, that people will step in, soothe us, guide us, and take the edge off the suffering. And when that help doesn't arrive, the pain feels even worse. It is not just the wound we struggle with, but the disappointment that no one came to save us. This is why pain can either break you or build you. It depends on whether you treat it as punishment or as a teacher. When you see pain as punishment, you drown in it. You replay the questions, why me? Why now? Why can't someone step in? Those questions create anger and bitterness. They make the suffering heavier because now you're not only battling pain, you're also battling the illusion that life owes you comfort. But here is the reality: life owes you nothing, and the world owes you nothing. Pain is not punishment. Pain is instruction. It is life's most effective teaching method, sharper than books, louder than lectures, and more transformative than advice. Think about every major lesson you've learned. Was it in moments of ease? Rarely. It was when you failed an exam you thought you'd pass. It was when you lost a job you thought was secure. It was when someone you trusted broke your heart. Those moments scarred you, yes, but they also educated you in a way comfort never could. You became more cautious, more aware, more resilient. That's the hidden purpose of pain. It doesn't come to crush you. It comes to shape you. The weight that crushes the weak is the same weight that forges the strong. Now, here's the twist. Pain, when embraced as a teacher, becomes fuel. Every sleepless night is sharpening you. Every setback is chiseling away the unnecessary pieces, leaving behind the version of you that can withstand storms. Every no you hear, every door that closes, every betrayal you suffer, these are not punishments handed out by a cruel universe. They are assignments designed to test, refine, and prepare you. Without these, you remain soft. With them, you become unbreakable. Imagine a blade. In its raw state, it is just a lump of metal, dull, ordinary, unremarkable. But expose it to fire, hammer it with force, bend it, strike it, cool it, heat it again, and slowly it becomes a weapon of precision and strength. Pain is that fire. Resistance is that hammer. And you, if you choose to endure, are that blade. The very pressure that feels unbearable today is what gives you the sharpness and resilience tomorrow. Here's another truth most people don't want to admit. Comfort weakens us. We crave it, but too much comfort makes us fragile. A life without pain creates people who cannot handle reality. But pain creates perspective. Pain teaches appreciation. When you've been hungry, you savor food. When you've been broke, you respect money. When you've been abandoned, you value loyalty. Every ache adds depth to your character, carving wisdom into your soul. And yet, many people run from pain. They numb it with distractions, with addictions, with endless escapes that promise relief but offer emptiness. They treat pain like an enemy, forgetting that pain is not here to destroy them. It is here to build them. If you spend your whole life dodging pain, you also dodge growth. If you spend your whole life demanding comfort, you also deny yourself strength. That is why the bravest thing you can ever do is face your pain head on, not with resentment, but with curiosity. Ask it, what are you here to teach me? What lesson am I missing? What part of me needs to grow stronger? When you flip the perspective like this, pain stops being an unbearable burden and starts being a mentor. The suffering does not lessen immediately, but your endurance grows. And when endurance grows, transformation follows. The scars you carry become evidence that you survived battles others couldn't. They are proof that the fire tried to burn you and failed. They are reminders that you are still here, still breathing, still building. Here is the most liberating part. When you accept pain as a teacher, you stop waiting for sympathy. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You stop thinking that the presence of pain is unfair. Instead, you embrace it as part of the process. Nobody else may understand what you're going through. Nobody else may care. But the truth is, they don't have to, because the lesson isn't theirs, it's yours. The training isn't theirs, it's yours. The growth isn't theirs, it's yours. So the next time you feel like screaming, like collapsing under the weight, like demanding to know why life has treated you this way, pause, breathe, and remember, pain is not punishment. It is preparation. Every sting is a seed of strength being planted within you. And when the time comes, you will rise with a power that only suffering could have given you. You see, freedom is hidden inside pain. Because once you realize that it is your teacher, not your executioner, you stop fearing it. You stop running. You start learning. And from those lessons, you build the resilience that makes you unstoppable. That is why pain must never be seen as the enemy. It is the forge. It is the classroom. It is the weight that makes you stronger. And though nobody else may carry it with you, though nobody else may care enough to take it away, the gift of that pain is yours alone. And it will take you further than sympathy ever could. If you take one lesson from life seriously, let it be this: the day you stop depending on others to hold you up is the day you truly start to rise. Freedom is not found in wealth. It is not found in status, and it is not even found in the applause of the crowd. Freedom begins in self-reliance. It begins when you accept that nobody else is going to fight your battles, nobody else is going to carry your dreams, and nobody else is responsible for the outcome of your life. Think about how often people delay their journey because they are waiting for someone to encourage them, waiting for someone to recognize their talent, waiting for someone to push them into action. But waiting is a silent thief. It robs you of years of opportunities, of momentum. By the time you realize nobody is coming to rescue you, you've already lost precious time that could have been used to build yourself. When you stop waiting, when you stop expecting, you begin to act. And that action, that first step of independence, is where freedom begins. Self-reliance doesn't mean you never accept help. It doesn't mean you live without community. And it doesn't mean you isolate yourself. It means you stand firm knowing that whether or not the help arrives, you are still moving forward. You no longer place your destiny in someone else's hands. You don't let your progress depend on whether people believe in you. The moment you release yourself from that dependency, you inherit the gift of true power, because nobody can take away what you built with your own hands. Now, there's a hidden advantage in realizing nobody is watching you as closely as you think. People imagine a spotlight shining on them at all times, convinced that every failure will be mocked, every misstep magnified, every attempt scrutinized. But here's the liberating truth. Most people are too wrapped up in their own struggles to care about yours. And that indifference is not a curse. It is a shield. It gives you room to experiment, to stumble, to fall, and to rise again without the weight of constant judgment. You can fail privately, you can learn quietly, and you can grow steadily. By the time they notice, you're already standing tall. Fear of judgment is one of the greatest chains holding people back. They silence their own voice because they imagine laughter. They bury their own ideas because they fear criticism. They hesitate to chase their dreams because they picture a crowd whispering behind their back. But here is the truth. The crowd is not watching, and even if they are, their judgment cannot feed you, cannot clothe you, cannot build your legacy. Why should their opinions hold more weight than your own determination? The freedom of self-reliance is realizing that if they are not contributing to your struggle, they have no authority over your choices. Let's face it, the strongest people in history were rarely the ones surrounded by endless support. They were the ones who stood when no hand reached out. They were the ones who carved their own path, even when others doubted, mocked, or ignored them. That strength didn't come from sympathy, it came from resilience. And resilience is born in the solitude of self-reliance. Self-reliance also means accountability. You no longer have the luxury of blaming others. You don't get to point fingers at family, at friends, at society. You accept that your circumstances may not be your fault, but your response to them is entirely your responsibility. That responsibility is heavy, yes, but it is also empowering, because once you own your life, nobody can hijack it. Once you accept that your success depends on you, excuses lose their power. You stop being a victim and start being the author of your own story. And let me tell you something crucial. When you stop expecting others to care, you also stop giving them control over your emotions. How often have you felt crushed because someone didn't show the support you hoped for? How often have you felt abandoned because people didn't cheer when you needed them to? But if you embrace self-reliance, those disappointments vanish. You no longer measure your worth through the lens of other people's actions. You no longer wait for applause to confirm your progress. You carry your own fire, and that fire is enough. There's a quote worth remembering. The man who stands alone is the man who cannot be moved. That doesn't mean you'll never face storms. It means you are rooted so deeply in your own foundation that no storm can uproot you. When you lean too heavily on others, their absence becomes your downfall. But when you stand on your own strength, their presence becomes a bonus, not a necessity. You appreciate support without depending on it. You cherish love without being defined by it. You accept help without being enslaved to it. That balance is true freedom. So let's return to the core truth. Trust me, nobody cares. And in that realization, you are free. Free to fail without shame. Free to succeed without permission. Free to dream without boundaries. Free to live without waiting for someone to validate your existence. When you accept that you must be your own anchor, you will find that you are far stronger than you ever imagined. That is the power of self-reliance. That is the foundation of freedom. And once you stand on it, nothing and no one can knock you down. The truth is simple, and it cannot be softened. The world does not respect excuses. The world respects results. It listens when you succeed. It celebrates when you win. It acknowledges when you prove yourself. But the moment you start explaining why you couldn't, why you didn't, why life was unfair, silence. The excuses may comfort you in the moment. They may even feel justified, but they do not move the world forward. They do not inspire trust. They do not build legacy. Excuses are invisible ink. Results are carved in stone. This is why the idea of trust me, nobody care is so powerful in this context. Nobody cares about the explanations you carry in your pocket. Nobody cares about the obstacles you faced, the sleepless nights, the unfair treatment, the bad luck, or the missed chances. The world is not a diary patiently reading your story. It is a scoreboard. And on that scoreboard, only one thing is tallied: results. Look around at the way people react to success. Suddenly, everyone claims they believed in you all along. They rewrite history, inserting themselves into your narrative, pretending they always knew you would make it. But rewind to the days you were struggling. Who was there? Who listened when you explained why you couldn't pay the bills? Who clapped when you described why your dream hadn't yet materialized? Very few, if any. And that's not cruelty, it's reality. People are wired to respect outcomes, not intentions. Excuses are whispers in a storm. They disappear before anyone hears them. Results are thunder. They shake the ground and command attention. If you want the world to listen, stop shouting your reasons and start showing your outcomes. But here's the trap: excuses feel good. They give you relief. They justify inaction. They protect your ego. It wasn't my fault. I didn't have the time. I wasn't given the chance. Excuses are the soft pillow you rest your head on while opportunity slips away. And yet, every excuse accepted is a brick laid in the wall that cages you in. Every time you defend your lack of progress with reasons, you surrender your power to change it. Because as long as you have a reason, you convince yourself you don't need a solution. Now contrast that with results. Results are undeniable. Results don't need explanation. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth when you can point to what you've built, achieved, or conquered. People may doubt your words, but they cannot doubt your results. They may argue with your opinion, but they cannot argue with your scoreboard. That is why results are the only language the world speaks fluently. Ask yourself this: which carries more weight? A person explaining why they failed to climb the mountain, or the one standing at the summit, silently looking down from the peak? The climber's presence at the top says more than 1,000 reasons from the one who stayed at the bottom. That's the power of results. They speak louder than explanations ever will. This doesn't mean life is fair. It doesn't mean everyone begins at the same starting line. Some people carry heavier burdens, face tougher roads, endure harsher storms. That is true, but fairness is not the standard the world uses to measure. The standard is always, what did you do with what you had? What did you build in spite of it? What results did you create despite the odds? That's what gets remembered. That's what gets respected. When you embrace this reality, excuses lose their shine. They no longer feel satisfying because you understand they hold no currency. Only results can pay the price of respect, freedom, and recognition. And when you realize that, you begin to trade the habit of explaining for the discipline of executing. You stop saying, I will, and start proving, I did. Here's the beauty: once you focus on results, you silence the noise of doubt. People may laugh at you when you begin. They may mock your small steps. They may dismiss your ambition. But when the results arrive, all of that fades. Results are the final word in every argument. Results are the proof that kills every doubt. Results are the respect that cannot be faked. And here's something even more important. Results feed confidence. Every time you deliver on your promise, even if only to yourself, you strengthen the belief that you can. Excuses weaken confidence because they train you to justify failure. Results build confidence because they remind you that you are capable. And when you are capable, the next challenge looks smaller, the next obstacle less intimidating, the next mountain more climbable. So stop waiting for people to care about your reasons. Stop wasting breath trying to explain why you couldn't. Nobody is keeping track of the reasons. They are only watching for what you produce. And the moment you produce something undeniable, the world takes notice. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. It is life's way of simplifying the game. The scoreboard doesn't track how tired you were, how many excuses you had, how unfair the match was. It only tracks points. And if you want to win, you put points on the board. You stop playing the victim of your story and start becoming the author of your victories. Because at the end of the day, trust me, Nobody care about the chapters where you explained why you couldn't. They only care about the ending where you prove that you did. Gratitude is a rare kind of strength. It is the quiet power that keeps you grounded even when the world feels indifferent. And when we say, trust me, nobody care, it is important to acknowledge that while most people are too absorbed in their own lives to carry your burdens, every now and then you encounter someone who does, not because they have to, not because the world demanded it of them, but because they choose to. That choice makes their care extraordinary. Think about it. If the natural order of life is indifference, then the person who truly listens to you, who checks on you, who believes in you when there's no benefit to them, that person is not ordinary. They are a gift, and gifts should never be taken for granted. Gratitude is how you honor that gift, and it transforms the way you see both your struggle and your supporters. There is a danger in misunderstanding this truth. Some people, once they realize most of the world doesn't care, swing to the opposite extreme. They grow bitter. They begin to believe nobody will ever care, and so when someone finally does, they dismiss it, ignore it, or worse, exploit it. But that mindset is poison. If you treat rare gems like ordinary stones, you will lose them, and you may never find them again. Gratitude is the shield that protects you from bitterness and the compass that points you toward meaning. Now, let's make one thing clear. Gratitude is not dependency. Being thankful for someone's presence does not mean relying on them to save you. Self-reliance remains the foundation. You stand strong on your own. You move forward regardless. But along the way, when someone offers their hand, their encouragement, or their love, you acknowledge it. You don't demand it. You don't expect it. You appreciate it. That difference changes everything, because the energy of expectation drains relationships, but the energy of gratitude fuels them. Picture your life as a long, lonely road. Most of the journey you are walking alone. Every step you take is yours to carry, and the silence around you reminds you that nobody is keeping pace. But sometimes along that road, someone chooses to walk beside you. Maybe for a mile, maybe for the whole journey, maybe just for a brief moment when the weight was heaviest. Gratitude means you never forget those moments. Gratitude means you look back at the path and remember the faces that appeared when they didn't have to. Here's why this matters. When you practice gratitude for those rare souls, you build resilience against loneliness. The knowledge that most people don't care can be isolating. It can make you feel invisible. But gratitude transforms isolation into connection. You stop focusing on the millions who ignored you and start cherishing the one or two who didn't. That shift in focus rewires your perspective from despair to hope. It reminds you that while you fight alone, you are never completely abandoned. Gratitude also has a strange power. It deepens the lessons of pain. When you go through hardship, it's easy to see only the suffering. But if you pause and recognize the people who stood by you during that hardship, you realize the suffering carved bonds you might never have otherwise known. Some of the deepest friendships, the strongest partnerships, the most unbreakable loyalties are forged in the fire of adversity. Gratitude is how you keep those bonds alive long after the fire has cooled. And let's be honest, gratitude is not just for people. It is for the struggle itself. Because without the struggle, You would not have met the ones who revealed themselves in your darkest hours. Without the pain, you might not have seen who genuinely cared. Gratitude allows you to look at your scars not just as wounds, but as reminders of the support you once received. You carry those reminders like treasures, fueling your strength when the road feels endless. But here's where gratitude becomes truly powerful. It inspires you to give care to others when you have felt the loneliness of indifference, when you have lived through the reality that most people don't care. You begin to understand the value of being the rare person who does. Gratitude doesn't just make you appreciate, it makes you replicate. You become more willing to listen, more willing to encourage, more willing to stand beside someone else on their lonely road. Gratitude breaks the cycle of indifference, one person at a time. It's easy to underestimate the weight of small acts. A word of encouragement, a message checking in, a smile in the midst of despair. These things don't seem world-changing, but to someone drowning in silence, they are lifelines. Gratitude ensures you never overlook their impact, both when you receive them and when you give them. Now, let's circle back to the hard truth. Most of the world does not care. That fact does not disappear. But the few who do care shine brighter precisely because of that truth. Their presence is rare. Their attention is costly. Their love is priceless. Gratitude is how you magnify their impact in your life. And in doing so, you amplify your own strength. Because you no longer feel abandoned by the many, you feel empowered by the few. Gratitude is not weakness. Gratitude is not dependence. Gratitude is a declaration. I recognize the rare, I value the genuine, and I will never mistake scarcity for absence. You may walk most of your journey alone, but when you remember the companions who chose to walk beside you, even for a little while, the road no longer feels endless. So yes, trust me, nobody cares. That is the baseline. But when someone chooses to, don't overlook it. Don't dismiss it. Don't demand it. Cherish it. Because gratitude turns rare kindness into fuel, and fuel is what keeps you moving when the world is silent. Power. That's the word that rises when we arrive here. Because after all the revelations, the reality that most people don't care, the necessity of self-reliance, the silence of the world, the resilience you must forge, and the gratitude you must carry, what's left is power. The kind of power that is not granted by applause, not fueled by validation, and not given by anyone else's recognition. It is the raw, unshakable force of knowing you survived the indifference of the world and came out stronger, sharper, and unbreakable. Trust me, nobody cares. At first, those words sting. They echo like abandonment, like rejection, like a reminder that the world is colder than we wish it to be. But then, if you truly embrace them, they start being an insult and start becoming a source of liberation. Because once you accept that nobody owes you care, you stop waiting for permission to rise. You stop waiting for applause before you move. You stop needing the spotlight to validate your journey. You walk forward knowing that your strength alone is enough to light the path. Think of how much time people waste chasing approval. They bend themselves into shapes that don't belong to them. They water down their voices, silence their convictions, and trade their authenticity for a handful of claps. Why? Because they believe those claps mean people care. But here's the truth, they don't. They clap because they're entertained, because they're momentarily impressed, because it suits them in that instant. But when the lights dim and the stage clears, those same people vanish. If you live for their care, you'll die in their silence. But if you live for your own mission, your own strength, your own growth, you never die in silence, because silence becomes your ally. You train in it, you build in it, you sharpen in it, you transform in it. And when you emerge, you don't need their validation, because you've already validated yourself. That is power. Let's make this very clear. Power is not domination over others. Power is not being louder than everyone else. Power is not forcing people to care when they naturally don't. Real power is sovereignty. It is the ability to stand unshaken in your identity regardless of how the world reacts. It is the discipline to keep going when nobody notices. It is the resilience to keep building when nobody believes. And it is the confidence to say, even if nobody cares, I care enough about myself and my mission to keep moving forward. Look at the most profound transformations in life. They rarely happen in the spotlight. They happen in obscurity. The bodybuilder transforms in the silence of the gym. The artist creates in the solitude of the studio. The entrepreneur struggles in the loneliness of late nights when nobody is watching. And the individual, broken but unbent, rebuilds themselves in the quiet of their own mind. Power is not born in applause. It is born in silence. That is why embracing the reality of indifference doesn't break you, it makes you. Now let's address something vital. When you stop expecting care, you start attracting respect, because people sense it when you no longer beg for their attention. They see it when you no longer need their validation. And paradoxically, when you don't demand their care, you begin to stand out. They notice you precise because you don't need to be noticed. That's the paradox of power. It is strongest when it doesn't seek approval. But here's where this becomes life-changing. Once you reach this level of power, you realize something even greater. The phrase, "nobody care," was never meant to be depressing. It was meant to be freeing, because if nobody cares, you are free to fail without fear. You are free to experiment without judgment. You are free to rise without asking permission. And in that freedom, you gain the courage to attempt what others are too afraid to even imagine. When you understand this truth, life no longer feels like a stage where you're constantly auditioning for applause. Life becomes a battlefield where you train, fight, and conquer on your terms. The silence of others no longer frightens you, it fuels you. Their indifference no longer weakens you, it hardens you. And their absence no longer haunts you, it frees you. This is the ultimate transformation, turning indifference into independence, silence into strength, and loneliness into liberation. Because at the end of the road, you realize you were never truly walking for them. You were always walking for yourself. And the power you've built, the scars you've earned, the resilience you've mastered, those are yours forever. No applause can grant them, and no silence can take them away. So trust me, nobody cares. But that's not a reason to despair. It's the reason you should rise. Because once you embrace it, once you stop waiting for the world to care, you step into the most dangerous, unstoppable, and unshakable version of yourself. And that version doesn't just survive in a world of indifference. That version thrives. And so, my friends, here's the beauty of it all. Yes, the world is busy. Yes, most people are caught up in their own battles. And yes, sometimes it feels like nobody cares. But that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of your freedom. Because when you stop depending on others to carry you, you discover just how high you can climb on your own. And here's the joyful twist. The moment you learn to stand strong without expecting anyone's applause, life surprises you. You begin to meet people who don't have to care but choose to. You start to notice little sparks of kindness, rare souls who shine brighter in a world of indifference. You appreciate them more deeply because you know how rare they are. That's where gratitude blooms, and with it, a new kind of happiness. So don't see nobody care as a curse. See it as an invitation to grow, to lead, to create, to laugh at the noise, and to celebrate your own journey. Because when you master this truth, you stop begging for happiness. You start building it. You stop waiting for joy. You start living it. Trust me, maybe nobody care in the way you once hoped. But when you learn to care for yourself, to rise for yourself, to shine for yourself, you realize something magical. You don't need the whole world to care. You just need the courage to keep going. And in that courage, in that gratitude, in that resilience, you find the happiness that no silence, no indifference, and no loneliness can ever take away. That right there is freedom, that is joy, and that is power. So the next time life feels heavy and you're waiting for applause that never comes, remember this, trust me, nobody care. And that's the best news you'll ever hear.